Yo, how's it going, everybody? It's the Masked Man, and today, oh, do I have a manga for y'all today. I'm currently reading this. I'm reaching near the end of this manga, and I'm absolutely loving it. And we're going to talk about Holyland. Now, I'm a pretty simple guy, right? Despite me caring a lot about the writing behind a character, doesn't mean I can't enjoy just one character beating the ever-living Christ out of another. And this manga, Holyland, provides that on many levels, but in a very different style and one extremely unique compared to many of the other fighting-centered mangas that I've encountered. Kengan, for example, which is probably my favorite out of all of the fighting mangas that I've read, is one that is, big muscular guys. Same with Baki. I mean, Baki, you ask the author how many muscles he was planning on putting into the manga, his answer would be yes. And then, of course, I love Record of Ragnarok. But here with Holyland, you start off with you, and by you, I don't mean you, I mean you, the protagonist of the series. Anyways.
I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up. You.
Yes?
Not you, him.
Point is, the protagonist's name is U-Y-W, okay? Alright, that was confusing. Moving on. But the really intriguing thing is he's this thug hunter, but he's not built like Baki or like Oma. The guy's built like me, but he's constantly unloading a can of whoop-ass every other chapter. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, that's not very different from most other fighting mangas, but I think the aspect of Holyland, what it does better than all of the other ones that I've read, is that it's very psychology heavy. The mindset of a fighter. Not exactly thinking to themselves what they're going to do in a fight, but what they do when they lose and how they recover from that mentally. And it's one of those beautiful things, seeing the protagonist really grow up and develop under your eyes, and you see the positives and the negatives of using your fists as weapons. It's a series that covers many different styles of fighting, and it also has some other standout side characters that I think you will enjoy as much, or if not even more, than the protagonist. But if you had to point to the best character in the series, it's definitely between the protagonist and someone else who ends up kind of playing a mentor role later on within the story. Pretty much serving as the parallel and the reflection of our protagonist, you. And for those that have read Holyland, you know exactly who I am talking about. And I really do enjoy that aspect of the manga that I brought up earlier, however, because the protagonist isn't constantly overpowered. He doesn't win every fight. He actually loses a good amount of them. But if I were to point out a criticism within that, is at times it can feel like a repetitive cycle where there's like 5 fights in a row where you can pretty much predict the pattern in which things are going to happen. And whilst I'm going to say I didn't necessarily enjoy the repetitiveness of it, I do understand the reasoning behind it and what it ends up serving within the story. Part of Holyland, or at least one of the things you need to keep in mind when reading it, is some of the reason as to why the protagonists lose some of the fights is because no fight is the same. Every fighter is different, and so is every environment. There's other things that play into it, like audience, how much you're concentrating, other external factors that maybe take away your focus from the fight, injuries, the element of surprise, etc, etc, etc. But even though I touched on this earlier, even though I do appreciate Holyland so much for the mindset of the fighter within the fight and everything surrounding the fight, I think what I love so much about Holyland is it questions many times the reasoning behind it, why they're all fighting in the first place. It's a setting with thugs and the streets, and you kind of learn more about these characters, and as you learn, you kind of end up realizing that even though some of them might seem evil, at the end of the day, they're just human beings who were drawn to the streets because they had nowhere else to go. That's where they find their friendship, their fun, their entertainment. They don't want to feel left behind, and none of them want to feel alone. And it's such a beautiful thing to see how you end up seeing like friendships built throughout the manga due to this reality. And I think all of this and the narrative and philosophical importance behind the characters is subtly thrown in there to the point where the fights themselves, you find yourself feeling more hype for them as the fights continue, and more seems to be on the line. This definitely feels like a much more nitty-gritty, down-to-earth type fighting manga, which I think some of you will really appreciate a lot, because it's definitely not as flashy as Kengan or as Baki or as Record of Ragnarok. And so I will say this, due to the artwork of Holyland not being, I would say, up there with those three, the artwork's still good nonetheless, don't get me wrong. I think the individual fights themselves are nowhere near as impressive as Baki, Kengan or Record of Ragnarok, but I think the overall manga itself and the narrative surrounding it, I can't overlook it. Holyland is, I'd say it's probably my favorite fighting manga now, along with Kengan Asura. And listen, that says a lot from a guy like me who pretty much has zero experience fighting in my life. I'm a pacifist. Nope. So I can't really speak as to how accurate some of the techniques they show you within Holyland are. I know some of them seem to be pretty outlandish and a little bit illogical, as for instance, if someone pulls out a knife on you, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to try some of the things the fighters do in that manga, just an FYI. And honestly, I think Holyland is by far the best example of how you write a character who goes from wimp to Chad. Honestly. Honestly. I don't think there are many other mangas where I could say I saw a whiny protagonist who I actually ended up liking near the end of the story. There also is a rival character within the series to our protagonist, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of his, as I've seen this whole, I want to fight you and I'm gonna get stronger on my own way done before. I've seen this with Sasuke and Bakugo and literally almost every other rival character in manga. So that trope is a little bit done, not the biggest fan of it. And there's also a romantic plot within the story that doesn't really develop till more so the midway point near the end point. And it's pretty solid. Nothing too bad, nothing too special, however. And so once again, the biggest strengths of this manga is the fighting and pretty much people trying to find their place in the world and no longer wanting to be alone, and friendship and the importance of relationships. Again, one of the negatives I would have to point out, and I brought it up earlier, but it's more so than the fights, is the overall development of the protagonist can at times feel a bit circular. Like he takes, actually not circular, but I would say he takes one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. You get the point. He falls into these lapses throughout the story sometimes where he doesn't want to fall into his angry bloodlust and thirst for vengeance through fighting, but he can't help it sometimes, especially when someone he cares about is in danger. And so even though there would be some criticism towards it at the short-term moment, once you see the bigger picture and see what the author was able to accomplish in the long term of the story, you go back in those moments and see the big importance behind them, even all of the losses. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you check out Holyland, and if you are new to this channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, that way you're notified whenever a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.